Does make sense. And I mean, that's part of your journey. And I mean, it's a really essential and interesting part of your journey. And with every family you end up working with, your perspective will grow a little bit more because of the, you know, the unique qualities of each of those families. And, you know, it is, you constantly reflect on your own identity as you go through time in terms of your practice and in terms of giving other people's culture the space to dominate the room that you're in, you know. That's just, I think that's something that we all do. And certainly with my British colleagues, you know, who are social workers, we've got Britain's extraordinarily multicultural, and it's so funny to watch a lot of my British colleagues be more confident with people from diverse backgrounds than perhaps my Māori colleagues in New Zealand, which is extraordinarily small. So, you know, yeah, it's quite challenging, no matter who you are or what background you're from. Every family is going to present quite unique challenges, and that's part of the fun of what we do, I hope. No, it actually is. It is in a really interesting way, because in fact, as a Māori going into another tribal region and as an academic, often they would go, oh, you're an academic, that you're one of the colonizers. You're no longer Māori, you're a colonizer, you're the enemy. And it's the same when you go into I go into another tribal region. So I'm working down in I have been working in a region that's not my tribe's region. And the way that I was received changed significantly when I started going out with one of the guys that's from the local tribe. This is a number of years ago now. The attitudes changed immediately. Suddenly whatever I was doing was acceptable, whereas before it was questionable because, oh, was that the way you do it in your tribal lands? Well, okay, it might be a good way of doing things, but even though it is, we don't really want you to do that because we want to make up something for ourselves, and even though we don't know what that is, we still don't want what you're doing. Do you know what I mean? So I understand your hesitancy, and the hesitancy for Indigenous people not on their own lands is just as strong, quite frankly. So the journey you're finding scary is as scary for us as Indigenous people try to engage with other Indigenous people nearby or even way across the seas. The only simple way to do it, frankly, is to try to actually find somebody that you like who is Indigenous, who will be supportive of you, because at the end of the day, when you get knockbacks, you need to actually talk to somebody and go, oh, this happened and I feel really bad, and you know, how do I get around that? And often with my Māori social workers, you know, they would have that happening often because they'd be working with people from outside of their tribe, and they needed more clinical supervision often than my non-Indigenous social workers, just because they would be hit harder by the Indigenous people because they weren't but from the right tribe. But the people from their own tribe, they wouldn't have working with them because we don't want you to know our secrets, you're from our own tribe. So my suggestion is persevere, find people that you can talk to, trust your own instincts. Don't let people make you feel bad and that you've actually got it wrong, because often the people that make you feel bad and make you feel that you've got it wrong have an issue you need to work through with them to make them feel more confident about themselves. It's not that you've actually done something wrong. I'd say 70% of the time when someone Indigenous is coming at you and saying you've done something wrong, they're actually just needing more assistance themselves. And often they'll be from left frame, there's somebody you're not working with, there's some extended member of the family, and then you've got a whole new ball of wax to start working with, and work with them collaboratively, you know, and all of the rest of it, and you could end up with a friend for life. So that's what I've found. Sometimes, you know, you work with them and you think, now I move on, and other times they're friends for life. But, you know, where you get the opportunity to engage, none of us are experts. None of us Indigenous people are experts in Indigenous stuff. So we're all learning this stuff together. Just feel free to walk side by side. And if somebody pushes you away, go and find somebody else to walk side by side with. Don't be hurt, because it's going to be a constant theme when you're working in the Indigenous world. Yes and no. I'd like to think my perspective of it is, I would say 70% of them yes, 30% of them would be 15% not bothered and 15% actively against. So, and when 20 years ago, when I started teaching this stuff at universities, I would have said 30% yes, 30% trying to get there, and 40% just not interested. So it does move over time. And I think with the Black Lives Matter movement, we will, I've added an extra 10% to my expectation. The Springbok tours and the Mandela stuff moved things for Māori in a really positive way, and the Black Lives Matter stuff has done the same. It's really moved things in a really big way. Actually, we look good, but we're not that good. We're 15% of the population, and so it tends, so there's only one group of people to look at. So it tends to look good. We tend to look good, but from a disparity perspective, we're just as bad as we've always been. And in actual fact, the better models that I have seen, in terms specifically of hospitals, would be in Canada, where they in British Columbia, where they've really integrated all of the traditional healers and traditional medicines inside the hospital side by side. And I think we're getting better in the community, but we are having, our major problems are in secondary and tertiary hospitals, specifically. And look, I've had challenges recently with even getting proper health services as a Māori, with my private medical insurance. So it does come down somewhat to the practitioners and their attitudes. And my fervent hope, having taught in medical schools for 20 years, is that the generation that's kind of aged 35 and under, probably 100% across the line, or maybe 99% across the line. And so I keep saying to everybody, things will improve. We just need all the oldies like myself from the mid-50s up to drop dead and go away. Let the young ones get on with it. And I think that there's better attitude in that younger generation. And I certainly find that with, particularly when I'm working with young house surgeons, registrars, or people out doing their GP training and stuff. Over the last 20 years, I've noticed a massive difference in attitudes to Indigenous people. So I think it's actually about keeping the conversations going from when they're students inside their practices as well, but also they are being trained inside the public health sector by dinosaurs with really bad behaviours. And I think we need to retire a lot of them sooner rather than later. That's the only thing that will improve. And I say this as an Australian resident about our own systems in Australia, and I'm British, so I'll say it about Britain as well, and I'm saying it about New Zealand. So that is globally what I have seen to be actually a problem. And I'm saying the over 55s to be polite and include myself. But, realistically, it's probably really, really appalling in the over 60s practitioner area. Yeah, they're the big holdbacks. Thanks. That is just like an awesome question. And look, you're quite right, because we've only got one language. Whenever I turn on the television presenters, the non-Māori television presenters, are using Māori words. They say hauora instead of health. They say whānau instead of family. And by normalising the language on every television program that we have, what it's meant is that it's made a lot more people comfortable with concepts of Māori and things Māori, and perhaps they engage a little bit more closely with Māori and feel like they're a little bit part of the team Māori. And so when the treaty issues come up for discussion,
more of them hear terms they're familiar with. They're not so alienated by the idea of the treaty discussion, and they maybe, instead of shutting and going, oh no, it's about the treaty, it's not about me, it's just about, you know, that mob over there, they kind of engage and listen a little bit more. And I think that's a real drawback in Australia, Canada, and the United States as well, where you have several hundred tribes, mobs, clans, you know, whatever, and languages, just, you know, this multiplicity of languages. There's no way of desensitizing, or there's no way of colonizing the non-Maori with the Maori language, that, you know, which is what we're doing. We're colonizing the non-Maori with our Maori language on television a bit. There's no way that in those countries, in your guys' countries, that you know, that can actually occur. So, and I think that does, you know, hold things back in terms of what you guys are calling, you know, the treaty negotiations and stuff like that. And I think that, I think it's really a shame, and it's also really hard in terms of the health system, because, you know, a patient's going to feel really good if you're standing by their bed, and, you know, I speak Arabic, so often I'll be with someone and I just have to say a few words in Arabic, and you just see them go, what, you know, they relax straight away in their, you know, in their horrible stricken state or whatever, and also, you know, I can do it in Italian and etc. and just using someone's language, a bit of Greek, whatever, relaxes the person immediately if you can figure out what they are. But with so many Aboriginal languages in Canada and in Australia, that's generally not possible, because even, you know, I've got colleagues in Canada, they'll walk into the hospital and they'll see someone and I think, well, they're Indigenous, but they probably don't speak my language. You know, yeah, it's a shame, eh?